Hi everyone, Jason Crothers here. I've noticed about Australian country music, there's not much reference to it online, and it doesn't hurt talking to people that know a bit about the Australian country music for one way or another, to get the history put down on YouTube or whatever for people to see in the future. And I met a young fella here called Bill Hawkins, isn't it, Bill?
Bill Hawkin, yeah.
Bill Hawkins. Hi, Bill, how are you?
I'm well, surprisingly well for a fellow my age. I was born up in Gympie in Queensland many years ago, and when I was about 15 inches long, they brought me down into New South Wales, and that's where I've grown up.
Right.
I've always liked country music since I first heard it in 1941.
Right. Bill, well, I know, and you, now what we'll do, we'll just quickly talk about, now Tex Morton was the first guy to start country music, as in being a record label and everything, is that true?
In Australia, yes. He was the first Australian.
Yep.
He was born in New Zealand, and I understand from one of his songs that his mother died giving birth. And his father reared Tex. When Tex was just into his teens, he left home. I don't know whether he ran away from home, but he went to America and learnt a lot about the American country music singers. He was a great favourite of his was Jimmy Rogers.
Yep. And
of course he knew the other fellows over there too, Vernon Dalhart and Goebel Reeves and the Carter family. He was familiar with all of them.
Right.
And then he came back home, and when he came back home, he came to Sydney, and he worked around Sydney at all sorts of different casual work. He tried motorbike riding, stunt rider of motorbikes, and he tried buck jump riding, and he got a guitar, and he used to do a lot of busking around the Sydney streets. And I heard one time that he'd start on this corner and the police would move him along, tell him he wasn't allowed to do that there, and he'd move along to the next corner and start again. He tried to get onto records, but eventually he broke through into records in 1936. And then between 1936 and 43, he recorded 93 songs. Many of them he wrote himself, and many of them come from America. There's a few from further afield, but that was his main repertoire. A lot of the songs he wrote himself, Beautiful Queensland and the Freight Train Yodeled, and songs like that. Yeah. That was a start. Then,
we'll pull you up there at Tex Morton. Before Tex Morton, a lot of people probably know about going back to Tex Morton, the history, Bill. Now, I've done a bit of research, and there's a couple of people here I've wrote down. I'm going to mention the name to you and see if you know them who were around before Tex Morton. Now, there's one called, the first one is Harry Cash, the Black Yodel in 1927. Do you know him at all?
No.
Okay, I'll go to the next one, Bill. Vince Courtney, Bird in the Gilded Cage and Through the Sin of a Son. Tex Morton recorded both these songs, but this guy called Vince Courtney did them originally.
I haven't heard of him, I don't know anything about him.
Okay. Grace Quinn's The Faded Coat of Blue.
Well, that's a Carter family song.
Okay.
I haven't heard of Grace Quinn.
Okay. Now, some say this guy was the first one. Len Morris, or Maurice, recorded as Art Leonard.
I've heard of the name Art Leonard, but I don't know anything about
him. They're saying he was the first one.
In Australia?
Yeah, Art Leonard. But his real name was Len Maurice, I think it was. There was two barnstormers, it was said their names were Vic Massey and Tom Stevenson.
Don't know anything about them.
And then the last who played live in 1921 was Norm Scott.
Yeah, I knew of Norm Scott. He didn't have a very great volume of works, but he was inclined to be polished in his approach to the entertainment.
Okay.
He made a few records, but not.
Okay. Well, they're the ones that sort of were around before, going right back before Tex Morton. So we've moved on to Tex Morton, Bill, and so Tex Morton was there, and then another chap come along, didn't he?
Yeah, Buddy Williams. He was an orphan, born in Sydney. I think in 1917. He was reared at Glebe Boys' Home. until he was old enough to be fostered out, and he was out to foster parents on Dorrigo, where he lived. Things were pretty tough. The depression was on, and they had a horse and buggy on this farm, and if they wanted to go to town, the family filled the buggy, and Buddy had to run along behind. I don't know whether he was barefoot, but he had to walk to town the 4 miles. And that's where he worked. And he said his foster parents were very kind to him, provided he had an ounce of energy to expend on their behalf. There was a travelling show, a circus came to town, and Buddy wanted to go, and he'd got enough money, a shilling, to go into this show by collecting and selling cordial bottles. They were on a penny deposit, and he had a shilling to go into this show. He went to bed early and dressed up a couple of pillows to look like him in bed, and he sneaked out the window and went off into town. Went into the show, and it was a great show, and then the yodeling cowboy guitar player came on, and he was fantastic. The crowd roared and clapped, and it was the highlight of the show as far as Buddy was concerned. And the fella up behind him was making more noise than Buddy, cheering and singing out, and Buddy looked around, and there was his foster father. So Buddy ducked under the side of the tent and off home. It wasn't long before his foster father came home and got him out of bed and gave him a thrashing. So Buddy left there that day, and he got a job of digging potatoes. A couple of weeks digging potatoes. When it finished, he was paid £7, and he said it was the first money he'd ever seen, and he didn't know whether to walk to the next town or buy a motor car.
Oh, right.
And he jobbed around in Dorrigo, then got a guitar and started singing, learnt to sing and yodel. And he was great at writing. I heard him say one time, at school he was no good at maths, but if it was composition time, he would sit down and write a composition about any subject. And so writing was a gift, and he wrote his own songs, quite a few of them about his own life. The Orphan's Lament is one song, a little song about his own life.
Okay, well that's Buddy. Now then after Buddy, who come along then, Bill?
Next one of note was Slim Dusty.
Right.
Now, Slim copied Tex and Buddy and the American ones, Jimmy Rogers and them. And he tried to get onto records in 1943 when he was 16. His father took him to Sydney.
Regal Zonophone, was it?
Regal Zonophone. But they wouldn't give him contract, but he recorded 6 songs, 3 records, and got several copies of them made, brought them home and posted them around to country radio stations. And they played them, and they were very popular. I remember when they first came out, most of his own songs, I think they were all his own songs, and they were very popular. 12 months later, his father took him back to Sydney again to Regal's Zonophone, and they still wouldn't give him a contract, but he repeated the first visit. He recorded 4 more songs and took them home and posted them to country radio stations. And they were so popular that in 1946, I think Regal Zonophone decided they would have to give him a contract. So early 1947, he recorded When the Rain Tumbles Down in July, and I've forgotten what was on the other side of the record, but that was a real winner. And from there on, he progressed into, he had a bit of a battle at times. He progressed then into making records and travelling, and I suppose most people know quite a bit of the history, more than I do, of Slim Dusty from there on.
That song, Bill, When the Rain Tumbles Down July, was that Slim Dusty's first song?
That was his first song he recorded. It was on his first commercial record.
Yet it's one of his biggest hits. So his first song was probably one of his biggest hits. That's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, and he re-recorded that a few years ago before he died, but he changed the tune just a little bit.
Right.
But I loved the old original rendition of it.
Right. Okay, so after Slim, Bill, who come along then?
Oh, there was a bit of a plague of them. Then there was Gordon Parsons.
Yep. What do you think of Gordon Parsons?
I think he was great, but like a lot of them, drink was a problem with him.
They say Gordon Parsons could have been bigger and better than all of them, but he didn't want it. Someone apparently asked him, Bill, that why didn't he ever get as big as Slim? He said, well, I've got me bottle of Plonkin mates in the bush and that's all I want.
Well, that could be right.
Yeah.
That could be right, because I know drink was a bit of a problem to him. Then later on, there was a lot more young fellows got into it with when travel became much easier and people had more money, they could afford to travel. And there was Glenn Jones and I can't think of
Chad Morgan, Bill.
Chad Morgan. Yes.
How'd he go? Is he big in his time, Chad?
Not desperately big, but big in his own field, which was comedy. He came from up in Queensland, I think, somewhere not far from Gympie. I'm not sure on that.
Right.
I think that's where he came from.
So basically all these gentlemen, Tex, the whole lot, they were all big drinkers, weren't they?
It seems to be, yes. It seems to be they all...
Was that because wherever they went, they didn't have to buy beer? It was all shouted, or what was the problem?
I don't know why, but it seems they all have that problem. Of course, drink and drugs ruin many, many people.
Yeah.
Go back to America and drink. There was a problem with Jimmy Rogers. He liked his whiskey. He was a chain smoker. And then Hank Williams grew up in a home where religion was the thing, and he evidently made some sort of a commitment in his young days, but when he hit the big time and got money, he got on to drink and drugs and drugged himself to death at the age of 29. He wasn't a songwriter, he was a songwriting machine.
Jeez.
He wrote dozens of songs and it was very popular, but drink.
Well, I heard Tex Morton sometimes wouldn't turn up to his shows because he was...
I have heard that. I've heard that when Buddy Williams went to Regal's owner's phone to try and make records, they wouldn't give him a contract. And as he was walking out, he said back over his shoulder, "What have you got to do to get onto records?" And as I heard the story, they said, "All right, come in tomorrow and we'll give you a contract."
Right.
And I heard a report later, much later, that a big factor in them giving Buddy a contract was the unreliability of Tex Morton. He'd make an appointment to come in and record a song or a session tomorrow, and he wouldn't turn up.
Right.
He could have him. So Buddy brought him into line. The fact that they recorded Buddy, and there was animosity between the two much in the younger days, but they became friends later on and performed together a little bit. That's about as much as you want, about as much as I can give you.
Who do you think was the biggest influence on country music in Australia? Can you just pick one person, or it's a difficult question probably, I realise, but...
they're Australians, I'd say Tex Morton was definitely, then Buddy.
Yep. And Slim Dusty's made a big...
Yeah. Slim Dusty's been by far the biggest volume of records.
Yeah.
Years ago, I heard that he'd recorded 1,200 songs, and he brought several albums after that.
Yeah.
But
he didn't write them all, though, Slim, did he?
No, he didn't write them all. He wrote many songs, and a lot of good writers wrote songs and gave them to him, and he recorded them.
Yep.
He did write quite a few songs himself, and his wife wrote a few songs.
Joy, yeah.
They made a film about 20 years ago of the Slim Dusty story, and it went back into his childhood when he first appeared on Kempsey radio station, and then when he started off, his first tour was an old 38 Ford V8 and a plywood caravan, and he set off. I suppose he had his advertisers ahead of him and booking halls and that, but he came to Taree, and from there his next call was up on Comboyne, a district on the plateau. There's a big climb up a long hill before you get to Comboyne, and going up the hill, the old Ford V8 boiled and had a baby, and things weren't going too good.
Tough life.
She was a bit cranky because the car boiled and
so I suppose they all travelled around like that, Tex and Buddy, they all got around their old cars around Australia and had their tent shows and...
to finish that little bit about going to Comboyne,
yep.
He eventually got up there and appeared on the night as scheduled, and there was 8 people turned up.
Oh,
What a blow that would have been.
would have been.
But
Yeah.
Tex had much more success in his early days as far as travelling goes. He made money hand over fist when he first started selling records.
Yeah.
And he made a few records in Sydney, his first ones, and went home to New Zealand to see his dad. And when he got off the boat, he's walking up the street, and here's his name in the window, the new singing sensation, Tex Morton. And he didn't know he was a singing sensation until then.
He was a good entertainer, Bill, wasn't he?
He was a fantastic entertainer, so I'm told. I reckon he'd sit down on a box or a drum and entertain you for hours, not singing, but just talking to you.
Unreal, isn't it? Yeah. He's probably the best entertainer of them lot, though, I suppose.
One of them, yeah. Anyway, he made so much money. Someone said he made a fortune and spent it and made a fortune again. But he bought out a travelling circus.
Right.
And he was travelling with that, and I've got a photo at home, the biggest extravaganza that ever travelled the roads, and I've got a photo of him going into his whole train, going into Tweed Heads or Coolangatta, and I think there's 15 vehicles in it, trucks and cars and caravans. And he was brilliant success that way. Then 1943 he got off the recording and singing and had a spell for a while, and he got into hypnotism. He went to America and he travelled as a great Dr. Morton, I think his name was, hypnosist, and he did well there. But while he was over there, that's when he met Hank Williams, and he was the opening item on the Hank Williams show. What do you call the fellas that open up?
Yeah,
the supporting act.
Okay.
And he used to open the show.
Didn't know that.
Hank Williams. So I was told not long ago.
Well, Bill, thanks for your time, because it's important to know the history of country music in Australia, which basically started all the music in Australia, I suppose you could say.
Well, I don't know, but I think it was an Australian soprano, Gladys Moncrief, and she was recording at the same time as Tex, and they used to have a bit of a relationship between themselves about who was going to sell the most records, who sold the most records, and Tex often outsold Gladys Moncrief.
Right. And we've talked about the gentlemen. Just quickly on to the women.
Just a sec. I think it was Gladys Moncrief. I'm not sure on that.
Right.
Yes, and the women.
Shirley Toms.
Shirley Toms came in about 1942, and she was popular.
What was she good at? Yodeling?
Yeah, she was good yodeler, and I suppose she wrote her songs. Yeah. And she came in about 1942. Yeah, was really popular. And then there's another one about the same time. Called June Holmes, and it would appear that she wrote a few songs. I think she only ever recorded 6 songs. She was a girl in poor health. She went away to Fiji. I think she married and had some children, 1 or 2 children, but she was in very poor health. I think she died fairly young. Shirley Toms was living in Auburn and Sydney. She died about 20 years ago.
Right. So she was about the biggest lady singer?
Yeah, well then Mrs. Slim Dusty, Joy McKean, she come on, and the McKean sisters. Yeah. And there was a few others too, lesser volume.
Oh, okay. All right, Bill. Well, Bill Hawkins, thanks for your time. And any one of you get to see Bill around the traps, he's from the Grafton area, but he goes to Polly's place down Gloucester and here in Grafton. Can anyone come up and say hello, Bill? Yes, my word. Okay. And if anyone knows I've made an error or what I've just said, please tell me, because I don't like that. Telling people things that's wrong. That's right. All right, well, thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy. Thanks, bye. Bye. Thanks, Bill.